Now it's time for Viking Mail Call, a weekly show where you, the fans, get to ask the questions on your mind and have them answered by former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach, Pete Bercich. And now your host, Tom Moore.
Welcome, everyone, to Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and not only am I joined, as always, by former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach Pete Bercich, but we have a very special guest this evening. Pete, this man was a 12-year NFL veteran and an elite long snapper in the NFL. He played for 9 of those seasons with the Minnesota Vikings. And how important is a long snapper? Well, his snaps for kickers resulted in 999 points for the Vikings, mainly for Fuad Revez and Gary Anderson. And to put that in perspective, Fred Cox is the leading scorer in Viking history, and he only had 846 points. And then Chris Carter, he only had 660 points in his Viking career. So without further ado, Pete, can you tell us who's joining us tonight?
Yeah, it's Superstar, Rats Reapus, the Jailer, the Judge. I don't know how many monikers this young man has had since I've known him. But Mike Morris, it's great to have you. It's just good to talk again. How you been?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on. I've been waiting on this. I think it's going to be very enlightening to those who get their hands on this podcast, to say the very least. And you forgot Jury, and you forgot
That's right.
Jackass, and possibly Slapnut. So I go by all of those as well. And, Tom, I played 13 years. Come on. Not 12.
It's funny that you say that, Mike, because that's a mistake that gets made all the time. Because for example, I was on the team from 94 until 2000, and people look at that and they say 6 seasons. Well, it was actually 7, because you got to count that you don't start at 0, you start at 1, right?
Absolutely.
So, when you're dealing with professionals, they get that, but we'll let one slide.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll correct it at 13, and just to set the statistical record straight for all the fans, Pete Bercich has his own records, and he sits 6th all-time in special teams tackles for the Vikings, behind other notables like Chris Walsh and Brent Novoselsky and Harold Morrow. So, he had a pretty good 7-year career himself.
It was fun. I remember, Brett, those guys were all there, and Nova was there my rookie year, and unfortunately for Brent, I think he shattered his shoulder. That ended his career kind of early. But we had a great group back then. It was just guys like Walsh and Harold Morrow and Brett Novoselsky. It was, I think, special teams. I don't know if it means less these days with the way the kicks are and everything else, but we had a really, really good group of guys that was kept together. We stuck together, and we took pride in what we did. No question about it.
I'd love to add to that. I mean, I think it was an exceptional group. That's quite a list of people to be named with Pete and all those guys. Novo, I think, actually had a neck issue too. I think he actually broke several discs in his neck, and it ended his career. And he had to settle. And it was partly shoulder too, from an old shoulder-related issue. But he just spoke with him about 3 months ago, and he's doing quite well though in Chicago. He's doing well for himself.
It's funny, Mike, that you bring that up. It's just because when you see these guys, you just know, like, getting hurt was not a question of if, it was just when. You know what I mean? You see some of these guys come through, and back in the day with wedges and everything else, and busting wedges and doing that, I mean, it was hell on your body. I mean, it's good to see that these guys can get through, and not just get beat up like they used to. Although I think it's taken an element out of the game, no question about it. But probably the most physical part of the entire game has been eliminated, and that's the kickoff return. Because even if you're a backup offensive lineman or a backup defensive lineman and you get stuck in that wedge, it is not a fun place to be.
No, I used to be in the wedge when I played for the St. Louis Cardinals. That kind of dates me, but back in 86 and 87, I was in what they called the R5, or the captain's position in the wedge. And being the captain's position meant you had to look back, time it out with the receiver receiving the football, and yell go. And, of course, by that time you were holding hands. The wedge was holding hands and leading upfield. And right about the time you turn back and looking at a kick returner, as you've told him, to see that he's got the ball and yell go, you turn around and you catch someone that's running full speed at about 275 pounds in the mouth. So there's nothing quite like that. I was so happy. I was so proud to be the captain's position on wedge. And I don't have a single real front tooth to prove that I actually did it, but they're out there on the field somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you what,
They're
as we think about those opportunities, we're going to get a chance to actually reminisce about some of your time in the mid-'90s and late '90s teams of the Vikings. Before we do, guys, I wanted to kind of turn our attention to the 2014 squad. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, well, I'm going to actually start with the big news of the day, and, you know, it's all around the nation, and you guys are the perfect guys to talk about it. As ACDC drummer Phil Rudd attempted to procure someone to commit 2 murders for him. Guys, I know it's all about dirty deeds done cheap, but is this legendary band finished?
I'm sick by this, actually. You know, I bought the Let There Be Rock album, the first one in 1976 that I ever owned. It was sort of a bootleg copy that was released out of Australia. I found it in Des Moines, Iowa, on some shelf collecting dust. And Let There Be Rock. It kind of changed my life. I was living in a cornfield with my parents down in Centerville, Iowa. And from that day forward, I was an ACDC fan in 1976. It kind of changed everything for me. I grew up with ACDC in the weight room and everything else. I'm not happy with what Rudd did at all, being that he's the only guy I ever got an autograph from personally. Was Phil Rudd, the drummer. But,
Wow.
Malcolm has dementia. I mean, Brian Johnson's voice is shot. Bon Scott, long gone and dead. But, you know, I mean, there's Angus. Angus he's going to outlive them all, and Cliff Williams, the bass player. But sad day for me, because today really officially is the end of that band as I knew it. It's never going to be reassembled with the originals again. So, done deal, ACDC.
Yeah, it was a hell of a run, though. I mean, they've been around since, what, 74?
73, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. I mean, that's 40 plus years. And 40 years, especially that, is pretty remarkable.
40 years, and they did an album. They got a new album out and everything else, but I'm sick over the whole thing because of, obviously, the implications to Phil Rudd. That's my group. I mean, I'm going to probably go out tomorrow and get a tattoo, an ACDC tattoo right now. I think about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's your legal proceedings, which leads us into the big news in Minnesota. So you guys know where we're going in this thing. The fans and the media are all talking about Adrian Peterson. You know, he completed a plea deal on Tuesday that keeps him out of jail for these child abuse charges. But now the NFL and the Vikings, they got to make a decision about his immediate future. And you know, Pete, let's start with you and have Mike chime in. What do you expect the punishment will be from the Vikings and the NFL? And will we see Adrian Peterson in a purple uniform this season? And what in the heck has taken so long for a decision to be made?
Well, I think my gut tells me that it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And you look at the crime. I mean, you look at the different things that guys have done. I mean, obviously there's zero tolerance for any type of performance-enhancing drugs. So it's kind of a separate case because it's about competition and level playing field. Off-the-field issues, you got to look. I mean, he was charged with a Class A, or he pleaded to a Class A misdemeanor. Now, do you look at it and say, we're going to treat some Class A misdemeanors differently than we are others? I mean, if he had a DUI and then it was lowered down to a Class A misdemeanor, you know, because that crime is just for some reason socially more acceptable or understandable, that you're going to look at it differently? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that is the case. But you're setting a precedent here all across the board, and you're treading lightly and saying that you're not looking at it as what is the crime or what have you pleaded guilty as far as a misdemeanor or a felony or whatever, but what the crime was. And that's, and I said this too with the Ray Rice case, is that it's the video, it's the pictures, it's the ability for people to see what happened that's completely changed everything. And I know I've spoken with a lot of fans, and a lot of fans don't even want him back, regardless. Even if the charges were dropped, even if you know, whatever happened, because of what had occurred and how they see it, and regardless of how he was raised, or regardless of any of those reasons, you know, they don't want him back. And you know, I understand that the Vikings are sitting on a tough decision, but I think people have to understand that this is all setting a precedent here, and it could be a pretty dangerous one. You know, because if it's the pictures and the videos and the graphic side of things that cause this type of, you know, I call it the court of public opinion, but it's not a misdemeanor in their minds. It's child abuse is child abuse is child abuse, and it doesn't matter. You know, you're guilty, and they don't want him back, and it's a dangerous precedent, because at some point somebody's going to fake a picture, somebody's going to fake a video, and, there has to be some kind of vetting process. And I think if he's fulfilled his obligations to the state, whatever those are going to be, and I know he has some community service and a fine, I believe, I don't know all those details, then you're going to have to step up and say, you know what, we're going to treat any type of crime against women or against kids differently, and treat everybody that way going forward. And normally, justice isn't retroactive. It's, that those policies are in place before those things happen, not after the crimes happen, because then you sometimes have a tendency to overreact, So it's messy. It's gray. It's messy. But like I said, my gut says he may not play in a Viking uniform again. I just for some reason don't picture him back on the field with this franchise.
Mike, when you look at it, the NFLPA is also, they've lodged their own statement a couple of hours where they say they fully expect the legal proceedings are done and they expect Adrian Peterson back in the field. How does that play into this decision for the NFL?
Well, whenever you deal with something this large, like Pete said, I mean, we're going to have to try and set everything in stone with the new policy that they're still trying to revise. That was the biggest issue, and they really don't have anything concrete to go by right now because it's not revised yet. They don't expect it to be done until about the Super Bowl. This is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a thing about morals, values, and such when it goes through Goodell's office this time. If he's going to take this case individually, the Wilfs. I'm sorry. I did say that, didn't I? The Wilfs have their chance at it too. So I don't know exactly what they're gonna do. They tried to put him on the field after the New England game, and the corporate outcry was, "We don't like that. We don't think you should do that, and we're backing out. We're pulling money." And that pretty much forced the team to sit him again.
Yeah.
So would they go back to that perspective of he's okay, he's been cleared from the criminal charges down in Texas with a no contest to reckless assault, but he's not, in the eyes of the people here in Minnesota and with his team, like Pete said, it's child abuse to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Texas. It's not the culture here at all in any way, shape, or form. This team resides in a state that sees this as child abuse. Whether it was proven the other to be something else completely different, a misdemeanor rather than a felony, that just doesn't matter. We saw the pictures. Then you have to weigh into it what Ray Rice is going through and his whole case, and that Goodell actually said, even after hearing that he admitted to striking his fiancée at the time, he weighed into it and gave him a 2-game suspension. Then saw the video, and all hell broke loose. The team released him. The league suspended him indefinitely without pay. Well, he's suspended, and he's gone from the team. On the other hand, with Adrian, I mean, obviously he got paid every single week, $750,000 almost every week, and basically the same thing. No contest. He got paid out there for 8 weeks, and I don't know how you could put him back in without doing the same thing with Ray Rice, or allowing him to appeal and get back in and try to see if the team would pick him up. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. Adrian is really well paid. We're talking $12 million this year, something like that, and scheduled to make 16, I think, next year. So the Vikings could say, look, you're sitting out the rest of this year, but we've paid you. We put our best foot forward. We believe in you. We've stood by you. But next year, you're going to have to come down a little bit in price. We're not going to pay a 31-year-old running back that's been out of the league for a year with a surgically repaired groin, which he's coming back from, to sit out a year and come back and make $16 million when the running game is not nearly what it was in the past. I mean, that was the NFL. Now it's absolutely opposite. He'd have to come down in money. I think the Vikings have leverage on him there. But this is a tough thing. When you talk to fans about one of their favorite players here, although I don't think he'll ever go back to that same status. I don't think he will ever return to being the hero or the Superman in shoulder pads, number 28. The guy that could do no wrong. We love him on the street. a very good guy. You know, everyone loved him. I don't think he'll ever get that kind of street cred back again.
Yeah. Well, obviously a decision is going to be made pretty soon on him, and because they can't hold on forever. But until we do that, we won't know what his status is. But at least we can kind of talk about the 2014 team. So I thought I'd ask you guys. You know, it was a pretty big win last week versus Washington in comeback fashion. And the one thing we're hearing though from fans, they're starting to chime in. They were pretty stunned last week when they didn't see either you, Pete, or Mike over at TCF Bank Stadium before the game to join that critical protesting situation about the new bird-killing glass being installed at the stadium. So I want you to help us here. Can you explain to both of your followers that you have why neither of you showed up with the other 6 protesters to fight this key national issue in an election year?
Yeah, I had I just say I had to work. You know, I can't. I'm not available for. You know, I am a lifetime member of the Audubon Society. Yes, I love our feathered friends since they've been around a lot longer on this planet than we have. However, I don't think any animal should get in the way of really impeding progress, especially, you know, something like this. I think that we're on top of the food chain for a reason, and you know, I think we'll be able to get by with 2 less birds in the air. So
I just never knew. I never knew that they were in that much trouble. I just never knew they were in that much trouble. Every skyscraper I've ever seen had reflective glass they could run into all day, every day before the stadium. And I just never realized they were in that much peril. I kind of left it alone.
But Mike, it's in some ways it's Darwinism, right? I mean, if you're a specific type of bird that's dumb enough to fly into a window, I mean, you know, if it's that much of an issue. Maybe you don't really deserve to be flying around on this planet.
Right? I mean, only this
not like we have a bunch of dodo birds flying in there. I can say it's one thing. That's fake.
Honestly,
Mike, you grew up on a farm. You've been in a farm. How many pigeons? You know, have you let's say extruded from a barn? I mean, you know, so it's just whatever.
It's just beyond belief for me. Sit here and listen to people talk about how many birds are going to hit the stadium. I don't get it. I don't get it. They're okay. Okay, they'll flock somewhere. Maybe one lone survivor, maybe one lone odd duck will fly into that damn stadium. I don't know. You know what? As soon as he hits the pavement, I'll cook it. You know, I mean, it won't go to waste. So,
I mean, I'm with you, Mike. Mike, I'm looking at it this way. I'm thinking, is there any other perfect solution for a place like Minnesota? I mean, where else can you go to watch a game and then grab your limit of birds on the way out for dinner?
As
long as you have a license in your billfold, you're good, right?
Right.
But I just want to know how many panes of glass, reflective mirror-type glass, there are on all those skyscrapers downtown. There's no bloodshed. There's just no thinning the herd or the flocks falling to the cement every day because of birds running into the side of the skyscrapers downtown. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Well,
so that's my deal right there.